Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu salam ala Rasulullah. We continue reading from Imam Al-Ghazali's On Disciplining the Soul, Kitab Riyadat al-Nafs, translated by T.J. Winter Abdul Hakim Murad. We are reading the introduction written by the translator, and we are on page 46, literally the very last paragraph. We have read in the last session about the dispute between the Mu'tazilites and the traditionalists, whom the translator said that he gave an example, Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Eventually, this dispute gave birth to a compromised position or positions such as that of the Ash'arite. We will read more about the Mu'tazilites being irrationalists, and we'll see what kind of argument is there for presenting the Ash'arites as an in-between school of thought whose followers developed a theology which, while making use of Greek reasoning, contrived to exclude philosophy from subjects such as the resurrection and judgment, which it held could be known only through the Islamic scriptures. Obviously, this is mentioning the incoherence, the book Tahawut al-Falasfa, where the Greek metaphysics is practically rejected, but not the other topics in Greek philosophy, such as logic, which Imam Al-Ghazali incorporated into Al-Mustafa. A separate chapter, but it is in the Mustafa on Usul al-Fiqh, philosophy of law, if you will. We continue. The process of translating Greek works into Arabic had begun to flourish during the reign of the Caliph Al-Ma'mun. He died in the year 218 of the Islamic Hijri calendar. That's 833 of the Common Era. An institution was founded in Baghdad for the purpose. That would be Dar al-Hikmah. And it's not only Muslims who worked for the translation. In fact, Christians who knew Greek, because Greek became the lingua franca of the Mediterranean at one point, so much so that even the Bible itself was, of course, translated into Greek, and that was the language. Other people, such as the Jews, also, that became. I mean, think today of Jews, Christians, and Muslims who live in the United States. Their lingua franca is English. People might not think of it this way, but that's exactly what was then in terms of Greek. So an institution was founded in Baghdad for the purpose, and within a century, the Arabs had at their disposal a very considerable number of the Greek classics. The bulk of Aristotle's works were rendered with remarkable accuracy into Arabic, and they were really reintroduced into Europe through Islamic centers of learning. And more than 100 of the works of Galen, far more than were ever available in Latin, were likewise translated, partly through passages cited in Galen. Many works of Plato, including the Timaeus and the Laws, became known, at least in summary. But as we shall see, the Arabs were more familiar with the later interpretations of Plato, particularly in the form of Neoplatonism, which exercised its great influence among them through a work misleadingly known as the Theology of Aristotle, which, while universally believed to be by the Stagirites, was in fact an anthology of passages called largely from the Enneads of Plotinus. This Greek heritage included, of course, discussions of medicine, metaphysics, logic, meteorology, and physics. What concerns us here, however, in the context of the present work, is the field of ethics. Ghazali had used Neoplatonic ideas in a few of his esoteric writings and relied heavily on the Arab Aristotelians in his works on philosophy and logic. What is more striking, perhaps, is that he makes use of Greek wisdom in the context of Islamic religious practice. The author of The Incoherence of the Philosophers was not a crude fundamentalist, and parenthesis, opposed on principle to any possibility of learning from abroad. He was, it is true, resolutely opposed to certain conclusions of the Neoplatonizing Aristotelianism of the Arab philosophers. When they say the Arab philosophers, maybe this has always been a problem with how to categorize and how to describe the those philosophers. While Al-Kindi, for example, was who will be mentioned here, was an Arab. Others were from the Ajam, if you will, non-Arab Muslims in origin. For example, Ibn Sina. There's in fact a discussion of whether Imam Ghazali himself about his origin, like his place of birth is Tus Khurasan, and he knew, of course, Persian, and he wrote in Persian. He wrote letters in Persian, and he wrote Kimya Sa'adat, the Persian equivalent of Ihya Ulumuddin, one way or the other. It, though the name is like that of the Arabic Kimya Sa'ada, but now the content is different. So is it the Islamic philosophers? Then it's also a problem, because if you say the Islamic philosophers, then you are saying that they reflect the Islamic worldview, which is not necessarily the case, of course. So he was not too far removed from the attitude of Al-Kindi cited above. After all, had not the Prophet of Islam taught that wisdom is the lost animal of the believer? Wherever he finds it, it is he the most right of it. It is he that has the most right of it. Wisdom, of course, there is an encouragement. There is an age of wisdom, as they say. The hadith itself does not enjoy a strong chain of narrators, but essentially the message is valid, that one can seek knowledge everywhere. It is like the hadith, but it is not. Again, this is not a hadith, but it is described as a hadith. اطلبوا العلم ولو في الصين, seek knowledge even in China. This is not a prophetic tradition, but one needs to, if knowledge is only available somewhere on earth, which is remote, not in terms of distance. I think it's more psychological. People are oriented towards the west rather than the east, though the west is, if you talk about places like the United States, the United States itself, it's a very young country compared to the Eastern civilizations. And yes, you can seek knowledge. It could be medicine, it could be engineering, but wisdom today, I would be reluctant to say that you can seek wisdom in Western circles. And ethics, as it is mentioned here, that's even more problematic. And I'm contextualizing and talking about 2024, a big failure of Western politicians, and not everyone, of course, but as the genocide in Gaza is still unfolding, there's a big failure of the West. Ghazali's willingness to profit from non-Muslim thought may also have been supported by his allegiance to the Shafi'i legal tradition. The Shafi'i school of jurisprudence is one of the four major schools of jurisprudence for the Sunnites. The Ja'fari school is the predominant school for the 12th Imamites, and there is in its original form, it is a valid school of jurisprudence. So you might find books الفقه على المذاهب الأربعة, الفقه على المذاهب الخمسة, jurisprudence according to the four schools of jurisprudence or the five. In chronological order, it's the Hanafi school, the Maliki, the Shafi'i, and the Hanbali, where Malik is the professor of Shafi'i, and Shafi'i is the professor of Ahmad bin Hanbal. In terms of the geography where they became predominant, in North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, it is the Maliki school of jurisprudence. It's predominant there. In the pretty much in the Turkish world, if you will, not everyone, not every part of this vast geography where the Ottoman Empire was predominant, it's Hanafi. Also, much of the Indian subcontinent is Hanafi, except for the southwestern part, it is Shafi'i. Kerala, for example, facing the Gulf. Also the Shafi'i is predominant in the Malay archipelago, Malaysia, southern Thailand, Singapore, which was originally really part of Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, southern Philippines. This massive U-shape area, you need probably 4 hours flight to cover this vast region non-stop. It is Shafi'i. Also, Shafi'i is from Iraq to Egypt, pretty much is Shafi'i. Not, of course, this is not every, and we talk about about our times. Historically in Palestine, for example, we had a period when the Hanbali school was predominant. Then you have the influence of the Ottoman Empire creating Hanafi institutions. The Hanbali is the youngest, and it became predominant in the Arabian Peninsula, not more, though the modern state of Saudi Arabia supported the programs overseas to disseminate the school with its school of theology. And it's not really the issue right now, and I thought this is very important to just to understand when we say Shafi'i, at least we have a certain picture. So Ghazali's willingness to profit from non-Muslim thought may also have been supported by his allegiance to the Shafi'i legal tradition. In their analysis of the concept of orthodoxy, the Shafi'i jurists had shown some flexibility on the vexed question of innovation, the notion of bid'ah, defined as any amendment or addition introduced into Islamic belief or practice, which was considered by some, particularly the advocates of the Hanbali school of law, to be reprehensible under all circumstances. It was thus that Ibn Hanbal himself had felt obliged to condemn Al-Muhasibi as an innovator who had adulterated Islamic teachings by borrowing certain philosophical ideas. The Shafi'is, by contrast, found scriptural sources which enabled them to draw a distinction between good and bad innovations. Shafi'i himself, from whom the school takes its name, is credited with stating the following: there are two kinds of introduced matters, muhdathat. One is that which contradicts a text in the Quran or the Sunnah, or a report from the early Muslims, athar, or the consensus ijma' of the Muslims. This is an innovation of misguidance. The second kind is that which is in itself good and entails no contradiction of any of these authorities. It does not contradict the Quran, does not contradict the Sunnah of the Prophet, the way of the Prophet ﷺ. This is non-reprehensible innovation. The textual sources, the Quran and the Sunnah, and the Sunnah is usually known from the compendia of Hadith, of prophetic traditions. They are not identical, but that's the source. The other two, we talk about ijtihad, so reasoning by analogy. So the athar are not a source per se. And that's number 3. And number 4 is mentioned here. It is ijma. And while here it says ijma of the Muslims, really it's more specific. In theory, talk about the ijma of scholars, because the average person, it has nothing to do with the person who's not learned, and this is not his or her field. I said in theory because today probably it is still valid as a today as a theoretical source, but in practice this might be impossible. How you are going to get the consensus of 2 billion people within a generation or two? They will become 4 billion people, inshallah, the Muslims alone. Ghazali's openness to certain aspects of Greek thought thus seemed to be potentially authorized rather than condemned by Islamic legal training. How Ghazali learned his philosophy is not fully understood. In his autobiography, The Deliverer from Error, Al-Munqadh min al-Dalal, he describes how, having lost his faith in knowledge acquired through the uncritical acceptance of tradition, taqlid, he sought to restore it through investigating the epistemologies claimed by 4 groups: the theologians, mutakallimun, the philosophers, falasifa, the esoteric Batinites, and the Sufis. It seems unlikely that he did investigate them in this order, as his account suggests, for we know that he had been familiar with Sufism from his youth. And when studying the Ash'ari theology taught in his city, he would also have been aware of its debt to Greek ideas, which were particularly evident in the works of his principal teacher, Al-Juwayni, who had been responsible for the introduction of a more philosophical approach to epistemology. I would say that it's not necessarily the case that you'll be aware of the source of the theology being rooted in Greek philosophy, and also Since we don't have here direct examples by the translator, uh, I would uh, I would leave a question mark just in case, of course. More than any other sizable faction, with the exception of the Mu'tazilite rationalists and the Arab philosophers themselves, the Ash'ari tradition in which Ghazali stood had been open to Greek thought. Mm, Imam Ghazali does say that he uh, studied Greek philosophy, of course, philosophy. Uh, and I think this was of course, when he was in Baghdad. And after, on his own, I think this is exactly what he said. Then he wrote مقاصد الفلاسفة first, and then تهافت الفلاسفة. Um, and it was a response really to Greek metaphysics, the تهافت الفلاسفة. And his position was pretty strong, since he declared the philosophers non-believers on 3 accounts, and on 17 accounts, we talk about innovation. The channels were usually indirect. And there's little firm evidence suggests that Ghazali ever studied Aristotle directly, as he preferred instead to read the Arab philosophers, whose ideas presented the more immediate challenge to the Ash'arite position. But their very indirectness made them the more efficient in infiltrating the thought of his school, for it was emotionally easier for a devout Muslim to borrow ideas from a Muslim philosopher, even one with heretical notions about the afterlife, than it was to borrow directly from the ancient sources, which did not even nod in the direction of Islam. Disillusioned with the presentation of philosophical ideas by the theologians, Ghazali tells us he made a detailed private study of philosophy, having realized that to refute a school of thought before understanding it and penetrating to its essence was like losing arrows blindly. I applied myself diligently to acquiring philosophy from books, simply by reading and without the aid of a teacher. This I did in my spare time, when I was not writing and teaching the Islamic disciplines. And even though I was burdened with the instruction of 300 students in Baghdad, in fact, I think the Arabic text would say Amama, 300 Amama. Let's remember, for example, that the two heads of the Hanbali school in Baghdad at the time, Abu Wafa ibn Aqil al-Khattabi, attended Imam Ghazali's lectures at the Nizamiya school. And 300 Amama, 300 turbans, it could be a student, could be a scholar. But in less than 2 years, simply by studying in those snatch moments, the sublime God subhanahu wa ta'ala appraised me of all their sciences. And after having comprehended them, I spent about a year thinking about them constantly. So 2 plus 1, reviewing and going over them, searching out their pitfalls and entanglements, until I understood beyond any doubt what they contained by way of deceit and delusion, truth and imagination. Ghazali then goes on to present a synopsis of the various branches of philosophy, as these were understood by the Arab philosophers Ibn Sina and, to a lesser extent, Al-Farabi, noting that some of their doctrines constituted unbelief, kufr, others were heretical innovations, bid'ah, while others need not be rejected. He identifies 6 disciplines mathematics, logic, the natural sciences, theology, politics, and ethics. The first three can be of benefit to religion, or are at least morally neutral, but the science of theology, الإلهيات, metaphysics, contains the bulk of their errors, since the philosophers have denied the bodily resurrection, God's knowledge of particulars, and the createdness of the world. Politics, by contrast, is about governing the world to secure its benefit, and this they simply took from the scriptures of God revealed to the prophets and the words of wisdom inherited from them. Then there is a lengthy account of ethics, and I would inshallah postpone this until the next session. Until then, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.